Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Tori if you're new, and I am so excited that you're here. Today we get to do the mid-year freakout tag. This is my first time doing this tag. I'm very excited. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab a snack, grab your water if you haven't had any today, and let's talk about some books. We start off with a very strong and aggressive question, in my opinion. What is the best book you've read so far this year? And for me, it has to be Empire of the Vampire. This book took my heart and then absolutely stomped on it, but in the best way. This was such a tough decision because I have read a lot of absolutely fantastic 5-star reads this year, but when I thought of Empire of the Vampire, it had everything. And everything was done so incredibly well. The emotion that this book will pull from you as a reader is incredible. Gabe's entire character arc through this book is one of the best that I've encountered. You are so wrapped around his pinky of him telling his story. And I love the way that this book is framed, where it's Gabe retelling the story of his life to this like vampire historian. Kind of know how the book is going to turn out right from the beginning, but you get more details, and I feel like the way that framed the story creates a lot of suspense right off the bat. But then he jumps around in his timeline as he's telling his story. I literally am struggling to describe how much I love this book. It has incredible character development and character arcs, but also the relationships between the characters. I love Gabe. I think he's such a hunk. Definition of dark, broody, grumpy, vampire hunter, like hot, toxic, destroyed man. I cannot wait for the other books in this series. The second question is the best sequel so far. And for me, that has to be ACOSF. A Court of Silver Flames completely stormed into my life, took over, controlled my emotions. I could not deal with this book. And I was not a fan of Nesta coming into this book. I have a whole Court of Silver Flames reading vlog, and I will leave it linked up above and down below if you want to watch it. But the hold that this book had on me, Cassian and Nesta's relationship, banter, support for each other, everything. I tabbed the heck out of this book. I used 2 entire tabs for this book because there were so many moments and so many quotes that were absolutely incredible. And now I understand why everyone loves this book so much. I just have to read a quote. This is one of my favorites on page 328. Like a knight guarding his lady, she couldn't stop the image sprung from the pages of her childhood books. Like a warrior prince with those tattoos and that muscle-bound chest. Her throat tightened unbearably, her eyes stinging. She would not let herself cry, not for herself or for the sight of him keeping watch beside her bed all night. I digress. The next question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. This book just came out and it's on my most anticipated releases for this year. It's called The Agathas by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson. I was immediately intrigued when I saw this book as a new release because Kathleen Glasgow also wrote How to Make Friends with the Dark, which was a young adult contemporary fiction that was about a girl who lost her mother very unexpectedly when she was in high school, and her process of grieving. That was extremely difficult to read, but a really important story. And it was done so beautifully that immediately when I saw, first of all, I love Agatha Christie. Absolutely love. The best cozy mysteries. You cannot convince me otherwise. When I saw that it was The Agathas and it was written by Kathleen Glasgow, or co-written by Kathleen Glasgow, immediately, yes, like, say less. I'm already there. A summer mystery that's about our main character, who is Alice Ogleve, question mark, don't judge me, question mark, question mark. She's our main character, however, it's revolving around her ex-boyfriend Steve, who dumps her, and she disappears for 5 days. Then she comes back and Steve is dating one of her good friends, who then also disappears. So all of Steve's girlfriends are basically disappearing, and it really sounds like a classic Agatha Christie type mystery thriller of a whodunit and what's going on. And that sounds like the perfect, fast, quick read to bring to the beach with you and just to have a fun time. Next question is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This is a book that I discovered, I'm not even kidding you, like in the last week. That is called The Keeper of the Night by Kylie Lee Baker. That's the first book in the series that is already out. I read it, I absolutely fell in love with it, and it's a duology. So the second book is being released in October. Yes, I have already pre-ordered it. And so my answer to this question is The Empress of Time by Kylie Lee Baker. In The Keeper of Night, our main character is Ren, who is half Japanese Shinigami death god and half Reaper, a British death god. Well, she's grown up in England and she's never fit in with the Reapers, and some circumstances come about where she is forced to flee England because there's people that are after her. So she says, let me go to Japan, let me go to my roots. I've never felt like I fit in Britain, so let me go to Japan. I want to be my true Shinigami self. Let me find my mother, I've never met her, and we're just gonna do all that. So she escapes to Japan, and she has to prove herself to the death god of Japan to be able to work for her or serve her by collecting souls for her, by battling some very scary Japanese spirits. I love it. I absolutely love it. And so I'm so excited for the second book. Then we have my biggest disappointment of the year so far. And this one's going to be controversial, I feel. It's gonna be House of Sky and Breath for me. Now this is really difficult. Like I can't lie, I was so disappointed with this book. And it's because I honestly believe that House of Earth and Blood was SJM magnum opus. It was absolutely incredible. Incredible. I loved everything about it. Everything. I read it twice. I've cried both times. Impeccable. This was giving like a classic middle book syndrome, and it was so disappointing for me after being so in love with House of Earth and Blood that this one just really fell flat for me. I was also extremely disappointed with the smut in this book, especially after reading A Court of Silver Flames and getting all of that smut, and then the slow build up in Crescent City to this. I was like, excuse me, I'm actually offended. Like, you did us so dirty. This was really difficult. Like, there were certain aspects that I loved about this book, like Rune. Love him so much. But I just feel like this could have been a lot better than what it was. Don't come for me, okay? Those are just my opinions.
That's my opinion!
Then we have biggest surprise of the year so far. I had a hard time deciding because I feel I was actually surprised by a lot of books this year, but I have to give a shout out to M from Perfect Paperbacks for recommending Heartbones by Colleen Hoover to me. This book just stole my heart from the very beginning and ran away with it and never came back with it. I read this book in one day, was not expecting to. This was my second Colleen Hoover book, and my first one was Verity, so this one's very different from Verity. This is also going to be an excellent summer read because it's very like beachy summer romance vibes, but in true Colleen Hoover fashion, her plot twists are just incredible, and her ability to create beautiful relationships, stunning. Also such a nice floppy paperback, like we love to see it. But this book follows Bea, who comes from a life of poverty and neglect. Like really difficult circumstances. There's also a lot of trigger warnings with this book, so I'd recommend looking up the trigger warnings before you just jump into it. She goes to live with her dad for a summer, who is very rich, and she gets to change lifestyles for a summer, if you will. And she meets Samson, who comes from a family of wealth. The two find themselves spending the summer as neighbors, and soon they realize money is one of the few things that they don't have in common. But the bond is too intense to ignore. But with only one summer separating them from the start of their new lives on opposite ends of the country, Bea and Samson decide to stay in the shallow end of a summer fling. The plot twists in this book, I literally cannot even deal. My heart was in my throat, like the entire book. This is a bit deep, but I really felt seen with Bea's character and her upbringing. And so like immediately, I think I have a personal attachment to this book because of Bea's upbringing. I saw myself in her and her thought processes, her like mental space and where she was in the beginning of this book. Like I felt that in my chest. So I was very surprised by this book in the best way. It was so impactful for me. I 100% was not expecting it. This book came out of the blue, and I definitely would never have picked this up if it weren't for Em. So, Em, thank you again. I'm sorry if my nose is getting redder and redder. I am so itchy from allergies, but I really want to film this video. Then we have my new favorite author, and this, I almost put this as, this book falls under a lot of different categories for me, to be honest. I almost gave this my best book of the year so far, but I thought it would be a little more appropriate to put it under my new favorite author, and it can either be a new author with a debut novel or just new to you. This book was published in September of last year, but to my understanding and from what I've seen on Goodreads, it is his only book that he's published so far, and it's also on Kindle Unlimited. This is Jonathan Edward Durham, and the specific book that I'm obsessed with is Winterset Hollow. This is a literary horror. It knocked my socks off. Not only is it very scary, suspenseful, crazy, beautifully written, beautiful messaging. It is a retelling of A Most Dangerous Game.
I don't have enough words to describe how much I love this book.
And how absolutely impressed I was by Jonathan Edward Durham's writing style. What a genius. What a literary genius. It is so beautiful. I will preface with, it's not surface level writing. Like, his writing is very, very deep, powerful, impactful. The messaging that he has ingrained in these words in this book is incredible. Incredible. I first read this book on Kindle Unlimited. I picked it up thinking, oh, it's like under 300 pages and it's a horror. Let me give this a try, and walked away and said, I'm purchasing that physical copy immediately, and I'm going back and I need to annotate the absolute heck out of this book. So I read it once. I'm going to reread it again by the end of this year. Switching gears from horror, the next question is your new favorite character, and it has to be Tobias King. Actually, it has to be Dom King, but Tobias is also really excellent as well. And so these are the two boys from the Ravenhood series by Kate Stewart. I am not over my read of this book. I just finished this book 2 days ago, and it's living rent-free inside my head, okay? These boys, I mean, you can see how much I tabbed this book. I cannot deal with how emotionally invested I am in these relationships. Like, I was not expecting to get as sucked into these books as I was. I went in thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, a dark romance, that's gonna be so fun, let's do it, it's summer, and I'm walking away with absolute heartbreak and attachment issues, okay? Like, I cannot wait to read the last book in this series because I can't wait to just figure out like what's gonna happen and how it's gonna end. But Tobias King is, I'm gonna leave it as a mystery because like I think it's better that way. beautiful, 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 beautiful man. But also Dom in the first book, the scenes with him, I cannot. I gave it to my boyfriend and I was like, you need to take notes on Dom, okay? Next is a book that made you cry. The only book that has made me cry this year was my reread of House of Earth and Blood. Again, I've mentioned this like when I was talking about House of Sky and Breath. This book is one of my favorite books of all time. I have so many tabs in this book. I just love the way that Sarah J. Maas writes friendship. Like, obviously, we love the male love interests in her books as well, but the way that she writes friendship in this book, Bryce's whole friendship in this book, the way that it's depicted in the beginning with Danica, I was like absolutely devastated. But then also, no spoilers if you haven't read it, but Leaba, I'm just gonna say that. So I don't know if this book just drained all of my emotions out of me at the beginning of the year, because I reread this in January and then haven't cried at a book since. I think this book made me just dead inside, and it absorbed all of my emotions for any other book like ever. I don't know, we'll see. There's an end of the year book tag. I will update if another book makes me cry, but so far it's just been this beauty. Can I just say, I love this question so much, and it is a book that made you happy. And I have two that I have to share because this is so good. So I finished The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, and if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I loved this book so, so much. And I've gotten some questions of if this book was my favorite book of the year, and I don't think that it was, but the story is so beautiful and so heartwarming, and it's a YA romance that is talking about our main character who sacrifices herself to save her brother, and then her mission is to appease the sea god that is causing havoc in the human world. And her whole journey, this was just such a good, and I mean good as in like morally correct, true hero story with such a heartwarming romance. How could you not? Like, if you want a book to just make you feel good and make you feel happy, that's what this is. It gives Spirited Away, Studio Ghibli vibes if Spirited Away took place under the sea. It made my heart so happy that I had to just rave about this book after I finished it, because I hadn't encountered a book that made me feel so good and so happy about an ending. The second book that made me incredibly happy was Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I had to mention this one as well because it's the last in a series, so I'm not going to give any spoilers away. It's the last in the Folk of the Air series. Some people really didn't like this book for the plot twist that happens in it. I loved it, and I thought the series ended so, so well that this book just really made me so incredibly happy. The next one is The Most Beautiful Book That You've Bought or Received, and I would be remiss if I did not mention Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. This is easily the most beautiful book that I've ever laid my eyes on in my entire life. So let's just take a moment. This is the Fairy Loot edition of this book. So gorgeous. Also, the stenciled edges are so beautiful. And then I'll just show you the art in the back as well. I need to say anything. Like, how beautiful is that book? Then we have the final question, which is the books that I need to read by the end of the year. So I have an entire shelf of books that are on my physical TBR, and I also have a huge list on my Kindle. So we're not gonna get that into it. But the books that, if nothing else, I need to finish these by the end of the year are books that are on my goals list, because one of my goals for this year was to read 2 classics. So I'm going to be rereading The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald because I love this book. This is by far my favorite classic that I've ever read, and so I want to reread it because it has been quite a while. I want to say like 8 years since I've touched this, since I've reread it, so I am very much looking forward to rereading this book. And then the second one that's going to be a new classic for me, but I've heard incredible things about, and it sounds right up my alley because it's kind of a horror, is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. The next books that I'll mention are on my 22 books that I need to read for 2022. The first one that I'll mention that I don't have physically is For the Wolf. I have this on my Kindle. I've started reading it. I think I'm like 20% into it, but I ended up just putting it down. I want to return to it so that I make sure I enjoy it because I've heard incredible things about that book, and I just don't think it was good timing on my part. It was not the book's fault. The other ones that I have on my physical TBR that are also on my 22 books for 2022, Once and Future Witches by Alex Harrow. This is the longest book that I have by her, and I just haven't worked up the motivation to read an over 500-page book by her. 3 sisters who join the suffragists movement of New Salem, and they're trying to pursue the forgotten words and ways that might turn the women's movement into the witches' movement. Stalked by shadows and sickness, hunted by forces who will not suffer a witch to vote, and perhaps not even to live, the sisters will need to delve into the oldest magics, draw new alliances, and heal the bond between them if they want to survive. So it sounds like it's tying in history with witches. Again, her writing style is very whimsical, very flowery. I love the worlds that she kind of creates with her magic. Completely switching gears. I have been wanting to read more of Scarlett St. Clair for quite a while, and so many people have recommended King of Battle and Blood to me. I initially read her A Touch of Darkness series, and I'm working my way through the Hades perspective of those books as well. Isolde and Adrian. Adrian is a vampire king. Isolde is forced into a marriage with him, and it is her goal to kill him. So that sounds like a good time. We love an enemies to lovers. We love a forced marriage type trope, and vampires, yes, all the yes. And then the last one that I'll mention is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I have been meaning to get to this book for so stinking long, and I just like haven't worked up the courage to do it yet. Everyone says that I will love it, and I think that that's scaring me from picking it up because I'm worried that I won't love it as much because my expectations are so high that when I finally get into it, I'm gonna be like, this isn't living up to the hype. You know what I mean? Books like this are so scary. So my friends, that is the mid-year freakout tag. To be honest, I'm kind of now freaking out because I have so much reading to do, but it's a good problem to have. I'm so excited for all of these books that I mentioned, and the books that I've read so far have been wonderful. Like, my reading so far for 2022 has been absolutely exceptional. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. Let me know your answers to the questions down below. I will also leave all of the questions that I just answered in the description box. I also have my other socials linked in the description box as well if you want to friend me on Goodreads, follow my Instagram, and we also do not only videos every Sunday on this channel, but we do live reading sprints on the last weekend of the month called the Last Call Reading Sprints, where we all get to end the month strong and catch up on our reading, squeeze in one more book. Please hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!